Massacre at Madefalva, tragedy of the Sekler people happened 255 years ago. January in the Alt River Valley of Romania is not for the faint-hearted. Temperatures plummet to -30 degrees Celsius, -22 Fahrenheit, or worse. Snow covers the ground for several months. The inhabitants spend much of their time huddling close to wood stoves or other sources of heat. Time spent outside is kept to a minimum. The days are short and the long cold nights continue for weeks on end. Every year there is one event that breaks this bone-chilling monotony, the commemoration of the massacre at Madefalva, also known by its Latin name of Siculicidium. The massacre occurred in the dead of winter exactly 255 years ago, on January 7, 1764, when over 200 Seklers, a Hungarian-speaking ethnic group, including women and children, were murdered by Habsburg imperial forces. The memory of that fateful night has been burned into the collective conscience of the Sekler. Guardians of the eastern frontier, independence or imperialism. The village of Madefalva lies in the heart of Seklerland, a name given to the mountainous region of the eastern Carpathians dominated by the Sekler people. Scholars have not been able to determine exactly where the Sekler came from, but they have inhabited the area since the Middle Ages. Whether or not they are ethnic Hungarians has been the source of countless studies. Whatever the truth, the Sekler are a Hungarian-speaking island, amidst an ocean of ethnic Romanians. Historically, the Sekler enjoyed a privileged position in the region. They provided service to the Kingdom of Hungary as border guards on the eastern frontier. In return, they were given titles of nobility and allowed to administer their own affairs. They practiced self-government with their own courts and legislative bodies. Even during the Ottoman Turkish occupation across much of historic Hungary, when the Principality of Transylvania was a vassal state, the Seklers were able to hold on to their privileges. This began to change during the 18th century as the Habsburgs centralized control of the region. Habsburg rule tended towards absolutism. Increasing centralization took place during the long reign of Maria Theresa, 1740–1780. Seklerland, the Habsburgs wanted to set up a border guard force that would be loyal to the crown. This was to include both Sekler and Romanian regiments. The recruitment was part voluntary/part compulsory. In response, the Sekler demanded that they keep their own leaders rather than come under the control of imperial officers. The Habsburg leadership would not hear of such a suggestion and were not willing to negotiate. Conversely, the Sekler were ferociously protective of their independence. They sought to limit outside influence in their affairs. The draft went forward, but was largely a failure. The Sekler that were drafted and reported had rifles issued to them. As resistance stiffened, they deserted and kept the weapons. A massacre and a migration, the consequences of Madefalva. Many of these Sekler made their way to Madefalva. The situation was turning into a test of imperial control. Would the Habsburgs break the Sekler will? Could the Sekler hold on to the privileged existence they had enjoyed for centuries? On the snowy night of January 7, 1864, the Sekler were planning to meet in council at Madefalva to plan their next course of action. Unbeknownst to them, the Habsburgs were well aware of this meeting and planned to snuff out resistance before it turned into a full-fledged rebellion. In the frigid, snow-covered town, 1,300 imperial forces struck swiftly, dealing a deadly blow to the unsuspecting Sekler. Over 200 Sekler of all ages, from children to the elderly, were murdered in a matter of hours. Thousands of Sekler fled into the mountains. They then left the region, traveling overland hundreds of kilometers to the east or south, eventually resettling in Moldavia or Bukovina. The Sekler leaders who were unable to elude capture suffered impeachment or worse. Resistance had been quelled. In the ensuing months, the draft was successfully carried out. The Habsburgs were now masters of the Sekler, or so it seemed. Much of the Sekler's historical autonomy was ended. Imperial officials now exerted control over the Sekler judicial, educational, and agricultural systems. They interfered in everything from real estate to marital transactions. Yet on a micro level the Sekler were able to retain many of their age-old traditions, including election of their own local judiciary and governing officials as well as decisions on infrastructure improvements. The distance and remoteness of Sekler communities from their Habsburg overlords contributed to their continued ability to enjoy a degree of independence. Miracle of the miraculous, the Sekler achievement. Each January hundreds of Sekler gather in Madefalva to remember their ancestors who were massacred by Habsburg troops in January of 1864. They gather at the Sekler monument set on the Vezalom, Hill of Death, a mass grave where the murdered Sekler were buried. The monument contains an obelisk topped by the mythical Turul bird, an enduring symbol of the Hungarian origin myth. It is the Sekler adherence to tradition, the memory of their ancestors and a ferocious spirit of independence that has allowed them to endure the darker moments of their history. They have long since overcome the massacre at Madefalva, but still pay solemn tribute to those who were murdered on that chill winter night. This is one of many such incidents that have marked Sekler history. Despite the absolutism of the Habsburgs, despite a 20th century campaign of Romanization and despite the depredations committed against the Sekler by the notorious dictator Nicolae Ceausescu, the Sekler have endured. Paradoxically, the Sekler may have endured not despite, but because of the forces arrayed against them. These forces helped cultivate an exceedingly stubborn streak of independence that resisted ideology, modernity, and tyranny. The continued existence of the Sekler, Seklerland, and a unique culture is the most miraculous achievement of a miraculous people.